I have been telling myself for as long as I can remember that I can't do moderation. I've always gone along with the abstinence model of dieting, or that's what I thought. I thought the only way for me to lose weight was to rein in my appetite, cut huge macros from my life and stick to this rigid, very extreme format. And that was the only way to lose weight. I remember one of the first times I ever went to a Weight Watchers meeting. I think I was about 17. I think I'd only just got my driver's license in the UK. And I had to drive quite a distance. I think it was about 20 miles to get to the nearest Weight Watchers. And they give you like the book that has like the calories of everything and, like this, and how many calories I could eat in a day. So if I was 17, that's like 1986. So Weight Watchers had been around, but they were still using the calories in, calories out. And I figured out, I can't believe I'm going to say this, I figured out how many Mars bars I could eat a day. And that would be my calorie allowance. Or Mars bars and crisps, or a sandwich, or things like that. I wasn't using it healthily. Nobody had ever thought to say in that meeting, that doesn't mean that you can eat all the chocolate to make your calories for the day. I thought this was great. I thought, wow, all I have to do is follow this. Needless to say, I didn't do very well on that plan, probably because my sugar was crashing all of the time. But even in recent years, like where I've been, following, I would say, extreme diets. And even though I've done well on some of these extreme diets, they have been sort of based on the abstinence model. So, for example, I've done a lot of low or no carbohydrate diets, like keto, carnivore, Dukan, paleo, a lot of these diets where you're cutting out one of the major macros. And there are other diets that you can do as well that do that. You can go fat-free, and you can also go protein-free. So the old rule of thumb is if you cut out one of the major macros, protein, fat, or carbohydrates, and you eat sort of like in a lower calorie range, you'll lose weight. It's when you combine all of the macros, the major macros together, that it influences each other. I might have gone into more detail than you need to know about that. Anyway, my abstinence model is to cut something out. That's the way to do it. Cut something out. Tell myself I'm never going to have that again. Never going to have sugar again. I'm never going to have fat again. I'm never going to have protein again. Whatever it is, In my case, it was usually carbohydrates. Sugar, obviously, but other carbohydrates as well. What I would call these days healthier carbs. And those abstinence models worked very well for me because I do well on a low carb diet. By following the abstinence model and cutting something out, for example, going no carb. And before you say it's impossible to be no carb, I know, even meat has like a small amount of carbohydrate, but you know what I mean. Cutting out major amounts of carbohydrate. I was able to see very clearly at the end of the day, I could base how I felt on if I'd eaten carbs or not. I could see at the end of the day, either whether it was on paper or it was on an app or whatever, that I had not had any carbohydrates. I could see I had abstained all day. That was quantifiable. I could see that. Right, no carbs or very low carbs. Therefore, I've had a successful day. I remember I had an orange today. And I remember one time, there was an orange, probably when my daughter was living with me. There was an orange, and I wanted the orange, but I couldn't have the orange because it was a big sugar bomb. It was full of carbohydrates. Now, oranges are not full of carbohydrates. They do have carbohydrates in. They have got a bit of sugar in, but they're not the sugar bomb. They're not going to, cause me to go into like, some kind of a sugar overload and, have a major collapse. I don't know how many carbs or sugars there are in an orange. If I find it, I'll put it up here. But just that extreme way of thinking that I would deny myself an orange because, it's full of sugar. But yet later that same day, something negative could have happened. And I could have, thrown in the towel, gone to the store and bought crisps, cookies, chocolate, puddings, just trying to think what else, cakes, and gone home and just inhaled 2,000 or 3,000 calories worth of stuff. Where was my carb awareness there? It's like it's that really messed up thinking that we get into. Whereas if I'd have had an orange, maybe that sugar bomb of an orange, I could have avoided the binge later. But the fact was, because I was doing all of these like extremes and I can't have this, and it was like I said, it was an extreme way of viewing things. I don't know if I was setting myself up for failure. Because now when I look back at it, and I'm not going to take away from the low carb. I lost 45 pounds, I think it was, doing carnivore. It's great. I really enjoyed it. I felt very good. I felt quite optimal actually, because obviously it's eliminating a lot of my trigger foods that cause my intolerances. So it's a very restrictive diet. And actually it did well for me. But what I realised after trying it for like 2 or 3 years, on and off, on and off, on and off, on and off, was I couldn't stick to it because it was too extreme for me. But like I was just about to say, when I look back over my history, actually some of the programs that I have done the best on have been moderation. Even though I tell myself I can't moderate, I've never been able to moderate. I'm not a moderator, I'm an abstainer. But actually, when I lost that significant amount of weight when I first went to America, and like I said, I think it was somewhere between 50 and 75 pounds. I genuinely can't remember what my starting weight was. That was using a Weight Watchers. That was using the old points system. I don't know even if they use points these days, but all I know is that I had 32 points a day, and then I had some free points or some extra points, whatever they were called, bonus points that I could use towards small treats. I also had one of the busiest jobs I've ever had. I was working as a breakfast waitress, and I used to wear a pedometer, and I used to do sometimes 15 miles a day. So that might have helped as well. But yeah, I also did Slimming World for a while, and we do knock these diet plans now that we're on a GLP-1. We do knock them, and they are not ideal. No diet is ideal by itself. But we do knock these. But I lost weight on Slimming World as well. But again, I just couldn't stick to it. And I think the GLP-1 is the stick-to-itness addition that I need to be able to do anything. So all of these diets do work. Whatever sort of crazy random diet that you've done in the past, like the grapefruit and egg diet, that works too. Cigarettes and coffee, which is essentially no calories, but that works too. They all work. But it's our mental stuff and our not being able to stick to it, and whether that's for insulin reasons, mental health reasons, just get bored with it or can't be bothered or don't have the right support, whatever your reason for not sticking to diets in the past. And I can recognise that, that there are hormonal issues and, definitely insulin for people, blood sugar, all of these things that can impact. I'm not just saying it's us going, oh, I'm not going to do it anymore. There are other reasons. But by being on a GLP-1, it helps with all of those other reasons so that we're able to do something a bit different. We're able to think about, am I a moderator? And loath as I am to say it, because I've chosen all of those abstinence models in the past. Oh, sorry, I've just kicked the camera. I've chosen all of those abstinence models in the past. I actually think I'm doing quite well as a moderator. And I am allowing, I am having, I've said all along when I first started this GLP-1 program that I got rid of all of my old diet rules. I wasn't going to follow any extremes. I was just going to go moderate. And it's worked really well for me. So I do have the odd, bit of chocolate, crisps, whatever. If I fancy something a bit different, I'll have that. I haven't restricted myself to anything. And you've also heard me say I've fallen back into lower carb, which I have, because I have the awareness now that actually that does work well for me. The same with the AIP diet, which I did recently. That's a very extreme diet. Now, I did do that for a reason. I did do that to work out what some of my intolerance triggers were, and that has really helped. I have still not introduced any dairy or gluten back into my system, and this is the first time in my life I've not gone, oh, well, just a little bit of gluten won't hurt, or a little bit of dairy, or a small piece of cheese, that kind of thing. I haven't allowed any of it back in, and I feel so much better for it. But before, where I was doing like these extremes, I was cheating myself because I was sneaking in other bits and pieces, The tangled web we have in our head of all of these different things and whatever, And the number of times, like I said, that I'd have a really bad day at work, or somebody would say something, or I'd have an argument with my daughter. And, I'd just throw it all away and be like, oh, what's the point? And I haven't done that once. I have used food slightly. So the other day I was making vegetables, green beans and Brussels sprouts. And I think there was something going on. I felt a bit uneasy about like things that are happening in my life. And, I was pouring the vegetables in and I wanted a big plate of food. And actually, when I looked at the vegetables in the pot, this is just talking about extremes. There's nothing wrong with vegetables. But when I looked in the pot, and I just thought, that's a huge amount of vegetables. Because I wanted to be able to continue eating. I wanted to have enough food on the plate that I could feel full, like eat everything else. When I poured them out of the pan onto a plate, this is before I even cooked them, because I just looked and I thought, that's crazy. It was this mountain of green beans and Brussels sprouts. Far too many. Did not need that amount. But it was that I'd fallen into something where I thought that just to have the extra food on my plate would be helpful to me in that moment. Again, like I said, there's nothing wrong with vegetables. I was just recognizing in the moment that I was using food, even healthy food, as a way of managing my emotions. It's a good recognition on my part. And I would challenge you to do the same, even if, eating rice cakes, for example. If you're eating 7 rice cakes, you don't need to eat that many if you want the flavour of something or whatever. But unless it was planned for, why are you doing even healthy foods to the extreme? So yeah, abstinence versus moderation. I do recognise in myself that, like I said, that boom or bust mentality. But I'm challenging myself. If you've got a problem with cookies, you need to take this with caution, and it's not advice. But if you've got an issue with cookies or potato chips or crisps, like my thing is crisps. I love cheese and onion crisps. See, Are you able to moderate? If you haven't had these things, are you able to moderate? Can you buy a small packet or a single serving of a cookie, eat half of it and say, I'm not going to eat that other half till tomorrow? That way you haven't got a whole sleeve of cookies that are tempting you. You've got one or two, or one split into two, so you can't do too much damage. Because I want to see if I can trust myself. And I do these, like I said, I do these midweek musings to really challenge my thought processes, which are incredibly messed up over the years. I've got so many rules and regulations and things I need to follow, and I haven't really followed any of them. It's like I've set so many rules for myself that I couldn't follow. It's almost like I set myself up for failure. And that's why I'm picking these apart one by one, week by week. And you're either along for the ride and you understand it, or you think it's kooky rubbish and I should save my breath. Both of those are fine. Whichever one you think is fine. But I just want to challenge everybody to think about what can they do to challenge themselves. To trust yourself. I talked the other week about trusting yourself. I'm learning to trust myself. I'm learning to have confidence in my decisions. I'm able to recognize faulty thinking when I see it, or when I'm aware of it. Like I said, with the blooming green beans and the Brussels sprouts, I know that's a funny example, but I mean, I'm talking probably like a full plateful. Just so that to put it in context, that I'm not being petty and ridiculous. It was a mountain of vegetables. That's why I'm using it as an example, because it's so extreme. But again, like I said, it's learning to trust yourself. It's testing your boundaries. I said in the last video that I've been consistently inconsistent, which I have. And now I'm trying to be consistently consistent. And even when it comes to the gym, I will stop talking about the gym. I'm just loving it at the moment. I recognise in myself the drive to, now I'm going, to staying for hours and hours and hours and doing every machine in the place, and then going swimming and, doing loads of cardio and things like that. It's the extremist views. And I'm trying to rein them all back in. I'm trying to see where I can make changes to all of these so that they are sustainable and within the bounds of balance, I think. Yeah, they're within the bounds of balance, And I made a conscious decision the other day when I went to the gym yesterday. I didn't go today, but when I went yesterday, I made a conscious decision not to take my swimming gear, because I recognised in myself that, if I brought it, chances are I would do the whole gym session and then I go to the swimming pool. In and of itself, that is not bad. But for me, it's recognising that it's that boom or bust, feast or famine, in or out extremes. And so I was slightly extreme at the gym yesterday. I did do 50 minutes on the cardio, even though I said I was going to do 20. And then I did every machine in the place, even though I said I was going to do legs or arms. And I wasn't going to do weights. And I went in and I did weights as well. So I haven't got it completely under control. But I didn't have my swimsuit. And that was good, because when I finished, I was like, if I'd have brought my swimming suit, I could have gone swimming as well. So it's just learning about yourself. And like I said, that's what these midweek musings are about. It's learning about yourself. If I give you one little nugget to take away each Wednesday to think about, how does that apply to you? How are you an extremist? What do you do to extremes? Still, maybe. Are you a moderator or an abstainer? Do you fall off into binge habits even if you're on a GLP-1, even if it's a small binge? Like I said, these weekly musings are just to take something, think about it a little bit and see if you can apply it to your life to make a small incremental change to your future, whether you're choosing to stay on a GLP-1 for life, or whether you're doing it to get down to your goal weight and then you're going to titrate off and be off forever. All of these things, whatever we can do to help ourselves for a sustainable weight loss future or sustainable ideal weight future. So that's all I've got to say today. I am going to be back on Saturday for my week 50 weigh-in, which, like I said the other day, is quite unbelievable that we're at week 50. So anyway, we are at week 50, and yeah, I'm enjoying the ride so far, and I'm enjoying spending these times with you and reading your comments. And a lot of you that do like the midweek musings always have something very good to say and that I can learn from as well. So it's good that it's putting that little nugget of an idea in your head that you can think about as well. So if you like what I have to say, please do give me a thumbs up. Think about subscribing and leaving a comment. And I will see you back at the weekend. Okay, take care, everybody. Bye-bye.